That's great. We actually are live.
Oh, good. Good way to
And
start, I think.
yeah, I figured that was cool. And I was going to play a little bit from YouTube, so I'll play a little bit, okay?
Sure, whatever you like.
And yeah, and I can.
What I have to share with people could be put in two words. It's called living music. Studying is good if you're already living the music. If you're not living the music, studying won't help you. So living the music means that you're singing and dancing this, so you don't even need to be at the drums. If I say, that's how it's going to sound. The points of resolution are really to be recognized not by reading, but by how they feel. And a four by eight, most drummers play everything melodically. That means hand to hand, one hit at a time, which is cool. But drums, it seemed to me, are like more made for harmonic. Of course, you can do both. Okay, melodically it would be. And that's cool. Harmonically, though, it would be like this, maybe. And so there's so many possibilities. The full body ride might be sometimes helps the band to feel the time, and it certainly gets more of your limbs involved. Let's take a resolution point. This is living music. It also connotes a lot of things, which means that the things that you work on actually are based on how you feel, not because a teacher told you to work on this.
Perfect for.
Yeah, for some people it might be good advice. Good advice. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's good advice.
Well, that was shot upstairs in my music room, my drum room, with an odd angle. I guess that's what that particular company does. They put a camera up on top, which is a little. I mean, it's cool in a certain way. I'm not used to seeing that view, but I kind of wish they had a camera more in front so you get the full panorama of the drums. But then again, it would have to be maybe wide angle because the drums up there are quite extensive. There's a lot of drums. I have all these different foot combinations. For example, I have two bass drums, but neither of them are actually a bass drum. One is a floor tom converted. The other is a djembe turned up on its side, so the bottom hole is pointed out slightly up like Dizzy's horn a little bit.
Oh,
I've got actually three different hi-hats. I've got tombecks, djembe on the right. It's many different cymbals. One ride primarily, but I have all these China cymbals and gongs for special effects and for kind of spatial kind of playing and stuff. So the
yeah.
set's kind of wild, and even visually, it's something. I have all kinds of juju and paintings and beads and lights on the drums too. So that I think that's my only disappointment about that particular video. Beside the fact that it was me doing it completely off the cuff. I no preparation, no. It's just like live, one take, and so I certainly have played better and probably have been more articulate. But I think it's a pretty good representation of kind of where I'm at today and what I have to share with people.
Yeah, well, I mean, just coming in on it and listening to it, I think it actually, well, of course, I have a consideration that I admire you greatly and love
Oh,
your
thank you.
music and all that. But to me, that was really enjoyable. It was very to the point, but warm. and it made me think of what we were talking about before about, you know, and the subject matter that music is alive, and that you want to uh, you want to be in the moment, and how you sang and played. Wow, really heard that. You know, that was great.
Yeah. Well, the drums and the voice, I would say the voice is the first instrument of humankind.
Yes.
And most likely the second, I mean, I wasn't around at the beginning, but I feel pretty sure that the second, sometimes I feel like I've been around that long, but I think the second instrument was the drum. And the voice and the drum are both kind of unique among instruments in that they're so direct, which in some ways makes them the easiest instruments. Because, you know, in other words, if I want to sing ba bo di be do do di ba do di da do, I can sing it. But if somebody put a cello in my hand, I wouldn't know how to get that.
Yes.
There's a whole lot that has to go that before you can get to the music. You have to learn where the fingers go and how to bow, and you know, if you're a trumpet, you have to get embouchure and learn the fingerings, and to be able to bring out what's in your head. But
Yeah.
singing is completely direct, and also drumming, and particularly hand drumming, where there's nothing in between the drums. So, you know, whatever I sing, it'll come out on the drum, like pretty close. If anything, on the drum set, it's probably better because I have four limbs, so I can get more polyrhythmic, whereas with the mouth, I only have one mouth. So it's hard to get polyrhythmic stuff with one mouth. But on the drum, any tone, if I say be bo pa di di bo bo ba pa di ding ding dong better get di go better get di go ding 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 it's automatic. Your hand does what it needs to do without thinking about it. Later,
Yeah.
you can look and say, oh, for the high one, I hit on the edge. For this one, you know, when I'm at the drum set, I notice that, you know, for rim shots, many rim shots are infinite, but, oh, that's a call. Let me let's see.
All right. That's why I had to get my
You?
phones so I could
Hello?
close
Any
quiet.
bubble? No, but that happens all the time. Um, so I was saying, what was I saying now? That interrupted my train of thought.
Well, I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, it's not important. But I'm saying that. Oh yeah, with a rim shot,
Oh,
you know, if I hear more of a funk rim shot, I might sing it like a BAK, like a doom doom back, a doom doom back, a doom doom back, and you. Yeah, I can hear you, but you know what? Can I call you back? I'm in the middle of a Zoom kind of podcast. You okay? Yep. Yeah, be probably like 2 hours. All right, thank you, baby. You're okay though. Okay, good. Well, sorry about that, but it was actually kind of important because that was my engineer friend, and he knew that he had found out that he was exposed to the COVID, so I had to
oh,
make sure he's
yeah,
okay, and it
yeah.
seems to be okay. He's still alive anyway, so.
That's
Um,
good.
anyway, so I was saying, so if it's like a BAK sound, you know, you have more stick
Yeah.
over the rim, but then like a more Brazilian rim shot would be more like a GAK, gung gak, and that's like a shorter amount of stick. But you just do it automatic. If you say gung gak, you're gonna go shorter. If you go doom doom back, you're gonna go longer part of the stick. So it's nothing to think about except what you hear. So when you hear it nice with colors and very specific sounds and specific durations and all these things, it'll come out that way. And that's true of drumming and singing, I think. So, you know, I mean, with singing, maybe there's things you can do to increase your range. Like maybe you hear something high that's out of your range or low that's out of your range. So that might be something that you can't immediately do. But pretty much anything you think you can just sing it,
Yeah.
including.
And
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to agree with you, and I know several people who are great singers who have never studied. So what they have done is had a lot of experience doing it, you know.
Right, right,
So and
right. Well, I never studied really. I had a couple of teachers briefly.
yeah,
Um, but look, this is what I often said when I was teaching at NEC, and it's a good thing they didn't have tape machines in the room, or I probably would have lost my job years earlier. Because what I would say to them, I say, "This is music is not complicated. You just sit at your instrument and you keep playing till it sounds good. And if you can't tell whether it sounds good or not, then maybe you're not meant to be a musician." But I always knew when stuff sounded good. And I'm not the most talented person. I know prodigy people who are brilliant at age 8. I'm not like that. And my ears, people have incredible ear. No, I had to develop it. So I'm not the most talented. I'd say probably moderately talented. But I always knew when stuff sounded good. Even I remember when I was 8 years old and I heard Elvis, I said, "Man, that sounds good." And Chuck Berry and Little Richard, I said, "Oh man, that really sounds good." And then later I heard, more sophisticated stuff, Count Basie and Frank Sinatra and Nat King Cole, and but I always know when stuff sounds good, and even more when stuff sounds great.
yeah,
So you just got to sit at your instrument until it sounds good, and then
yeah.
do it some more until it sounds even better. And it's like that.
Was drums always your main instrument?
Well, I think the first gigs I ever did was on Vibes.
Okay. Huh.
And I learned a lot because I was my first actual gigs that I got paid, although it wasn't much. I remember that we used to play 8 sets a night, and I made $15. But I had a good time, and I'd be righteously exhausted at the end of the gig. And it was playing with salsa bands with the crazy Puerto Ricans, and I was like 15 or something. And it was like illegal gigs. They would be, somebody would get paid off, and the church would open up their basement, and people would pay a little bit and bring their own booze, and a lot of beer being drunk, and probably some other illicit substances. But I didn't see that because I was only 15. But I'm betting there was, and people dance all night long. You see, and I got to solo a lot, and I realized on the Vibes, and I realized that, and by the way, there was no charts. All the people learned the music off of the radio by ear. They had no charts. So I remember the first night I played with them, I think there was a guitar player, and I asked him, I said, "What key? What key?" And he just smiled at me. He probably said, "Key, yeah, we're here, right, okay." And so at the beginning, I'd have to go up the chromatic scale until I found the key. And then eventually, once I found the key, I could pretty much hang with it. But I realized I soloed a lot for 2 reasons. One, because the Latin people really liked the Vibes generally, like Tito Puente and Cal Jader. But also so the trumpet players could rest their chops because they were hitting the double high C's, 8 sets.
Yeah.
And people dance all night long. And what I learned, actually a lot of my teaching philosophy came from those original gigs, because I was watching the drummers, and there was several. There was a conguero, and there was a timbale guy, maybe a bongo, all the horn players played percussion too. There was cowbell going, a shekere. So there's always 4 or 5 percussion going. And I was watching them and I thought, wow, they're improvising a lot, much like jazz musicians, but there's a danceableness, there's a groove that's unbroken.
Yeah.
And the dancers never felt like, oh, where's the beat?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that to me was a mystery. And I remember asking them, how do you do that? And they said something like, this is, I'm trying to remember back 60 something years, almost 60 years, but they said, "Oh, it's the clave, man. Don't you know about the clave?" I said, "No, what's that?" And they said, "Hey, we got the clave like sometime 2-3, and they go guru, guru. Sometimes the 3-2, and I thought, I started recognizing this as a underlying structure that they had so internalized so well that they could improvise quite freely without ever losing it.
Yeah.
And then I remember asking another question that, looking back, was a pretty smart question for a little know-nothing kid. I said, so that clave you just told me that had 5 hits in it over 2 bars, you know. I said, is there any one hit that's the most important hit? And they said, oh, sí, seguro. And they weren't school musicians, so they didn't know how to say "and of 2."
Yeah.
But they sang it. And I started noticing the bass would be strong on that "and of 2." And if it was in the second bar, it was a 2-3. And if it was in the first bar, it was a 3-2. Yeah. And that they were improvising around this structure. And I thought, wow, that was like the light bulb went on over my head. This is really important that I got this information. And it explained a lot to me. And then what I came up with was, anybody who's studied with me has probably heard me talk about it. I call it the resolution point meditations, which is, in other words, I wanted to master every point in the bar, because I knew even then I wasn't going to play Latin music my whole life, even though I love it. So I said, okay, the "and of 2" is very important. It's important in Latin music, it's important in jazz, important in a second line. New Orleans music has a lot of "and of 2." But I said, I got to get on I got to master each point in the bar, including even 1, you know, which seems to be the simplest one. But I've had so many students who think they're hot stuff and are already gigging and making records. And I said, can you just improvise to 1 in the first bar of a 2-bar phrase? And they can't do it. They've never played anything that simple.
Can you show me what you mean by that? I'm curious.
Sure. Well, I think the smallest form of music is basically a 2-bar form.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you can have 4-bar or 8-bar, 12-bar blues or 32-bar standard or whatever, but 2 bars is generally your smallest.
Okay.
Because 1 bar is like too tight a box. You can't really create phrases off of 1 bar. I mean, it's maybe theoretically possible, but generally 2 bars. And the Latin clave is 2 bars as well. So if we think of the 8th note as the flow of time, although we can have triplets, but let's keep it simple. 8th note, that means there's 8 8th notes in a bar. 8 points, you could say, right? So if you pick a point, let's say 2 in the first bar of a 2-bar phrase. So that would be dingy bop, ain't got to do the bop, ain't bop, bang to the bang, take it, go bang to back to the bang, do then go bop, it ain't bop, did it bop, ain't go bop, ding do the boom, to the back to the back, do did it, bop, ain't to bop, did it, ain't go bop, baba, they 1 2 bang, tagada, and do it, bop. And I would do that all day on each point. And starting with 1, because 1 is, you know, 1 is fundamental. 1 get up and button did it bunch bang did it bunch bang take it and do but it's got do 1 did it on and did it 1 do bang did it bang and did bang on the bang take it on bang did it on did it bop do bunch bang take it and do bunch bang did it on did ba ba did on did it bang Diddy one to bang, dig it up, to do the bone, cat, got up, diddy bone, bang, diddy bang, bang, to the diddy bone.
So why would people have trouble doing that with 1? Because it seems, I mean, of course, I don't know. It seems kind of easy to me, you know?
Yeah, it should be. But they never, you know, I mean, well, like I say, when I was doing my ensemble at NEC, I used to get there early. I would always try to first of all, to set up the room and also reacclimate me into music and drumming. Because during the week, I get very far away from that. I'm more into silence, and I don't listen to music much, and I leave it alone. So when I came to school, okay, I got to get back and tune the drums and everything. So I'm usually playing already when they walk in. Sometimes like a half hour as much, if depending on traffic, I'm already at the drums playing. I remember there was one time where the floor tom had a very nice fundamental pitch, and I don't have perfect pitch, so I don't know. But later I went to the piano and I found it. It was I don't remember now. It was a D flat maybe.
Yeah.
So that was a boom, boom. I was basing everything on that D flat on 1.
Yeah.
And I was getting into it. And by the time I've been playing it for a half hour, it was getting pretty deep. Because the longer you stay with these things, the deeper it gets, you know.
Yeah.
And so they came in as usual, straggling in. Not one of them was looking at me or dancing to what I was playing, which would be the first thing I would do. If I came in and a drummer was playing, I would start dancing to it, so that if I was going to join in, I would know what it was.
Yeah.
And then they're kind of waiting. They're getting their horns out and they're putting on the amplifier and everything. And then they're waiting, you know. They're waiting for me to stop and say, okay, let's get out this chart. We're going to do letter A and blah, blah, blah. And I just kept playing and nobody's playing with it. And so at this point I thought, okay, I'm going to challenge these kids, you know. And I said, did you like that groove I was playing? And they kind of begrudgingly said, yeah, it was good. Yeah. And I said, well, why didn't you play on it? I said, there's just a 1 in the first bar of a 2-bar phrase. It's pretty simple form. That's about as simple a form as you'll ever get, actually. And they were all looking and they started playing. And as soon as they started improvising, they lost it. In other words, they had never improvised with the discipline. Because you notice when I'm doing these things, I'm hitting those points every time.
Yeah.
And unless I choose not to, obviously I can let it go, but it's not because I lost my place. It's because I just decided to leave that one out. So, and they never had improvised with that kind of rhythmic discipline. Yeah. And they couldn't do it. The interesting thing too was the piano player wasn't even in the right key. And I'm a drummer. I went over to the piano and I found the note, which I think, if I remember, was a D flat, in about 2 seconds, you know.
Yeah.
I don't have perfect pitch, but I just heard, oh, that's not it. Oh, that's it, you know.
Right.
And so they didn't even hear that. See, this is how out of touch they are with actual living music. And then eventually, because I kept them at it, eventually they got so they could, took about 40 minutes before they could actually make music on a 1. And I remember asking them, I said, have you ever practiced anything that simple? And they said no. And I knew the answer already, and they said no. And here I am, 72 years old, and I'm practicing 1. I'm still working on it.
Yeah.
Because I don't feel like I can't get it better. I always feel I can get it better.
Yeah.
And so and I realized too, after that they left the class. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think they'll ever do it again. So in other words, they just skip over that kind of stuff and go right to playing Wayne Shorter tunes. That's why they can't do it.
Oh gosh, I know what you mean. I used to have a jam session, and at some point the students from Cal State Northridge came in, and they played their own shit, and it was great. I mean, they were smoking. They really smoking. And then I thought, oh great, I'll have them play the jam, you know. Wow. That was really bad. They could not play standards. They could only play their own stuff. They couldn't, you know, they never had expanded to that. So
right. Well, you know, for me, again, and this is another reason why I was one of the least popular teachers there. I say if you can't improvise to 1 in the first bar of a 2-bar phrase, you're not ready for standards.
Yeah.
Because to me, a standard, and let me say right now, it's not an exact science. Obviously, it's interpretational, because different people interpret the standard different ways. You know? So my way is not the correct Greenwich Standard way or something. But I have noticed that whenever I play with people who really know the jazz language, we always have almost a 90-95% agreement on where the resolution points are immediately.
Yeah.
And whatever discrepancies, we can usually close that gap within a chorus or 2.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, for me, example like, and it's a good example of how it's interpretational as well. Like a tune like Stella by Starlight, which is a tune a lot of the jazz people play, you know. Yeah. To me, that's almost all and a 4. I'll give you an example, because that's a jazz interpretation. 1, 2, do da, 2, 3, 4, oh, do, 3, 4, 3, 4, ba do do di 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, da di do di do 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 di di ba da di di ba do di do 3, 4 bridge. Booty booty oh, 3, 4 oh 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 oh. There's a 1. 1, 2, 3, 4 and last 8. Bay 8. Bop to bang to back to bang. Ooh 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 ooh. So now that I have that 32 bar form, I'll improvise. Bang to the bang, take it to got to the bop to boom to do to bang be on the bang to do got about 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on and so forth. So that's obviously a much more complex form.
Yeah.
I never counted, but it's probably 25 different hits as opposed to one hit in a 2-bar form, which most of the students can't improvise to. And so now to show that it's interpretational, I'm sure, because that's not a jazz song. I think that was a movie tune. It's either Broadway.
Yeah, I think it was a movie song.
Movie tune, I think so.
Yeah.
So I'm sure the original song is not and a 4, it's on the 1. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and on the 1, 2, like that, right?
Right.
So I think we could probably agree that the way I sang it first was a little hipper.
Yeah.
But again, it's interpretational. If I'm playing with a singer who's not a jazz, more like a legit or Broadway show, they're probably going to phrase it on the 1.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it's written that way too. I'm sure it's, and 1, it's probably, I think even in the real book, it's written on 1. So the point is standards have a lot of different resolution points. And when I'm improvising on the standard, and they come from the melody, how you phrase the melody. So, I'm using those, and I practiced that too. That was part of my living music. I would sit in the back of school because I hated school. I would sit in the back. So, it's kind of like, you leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. And I'd be singing this stuff and working out songs and where I felt the resolutions were, and then internalizing it enough that I could then improvise on it and get freer and more creative without losing the point.
Yeah.
But first, I would say learn 1 point at a time, master each point in the bar, including 1, which should be the easiest one. But
Yeah.
I found that even these so-called high-level students couldn't do it, at least not at first.
Yeah.
And they had never worked on it. Not once. All the stuff they do, all the practicing and the hours that they spent, they never just sat and said, I'm just going to hit D flat on 1 and then make something out of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also encourage them to make it danceable, no matter what kind of music you eventually want to play. I mean, these days I'm playing more like free music or rubato out there.
Yeah.
That's my evolution, but I started with dance music. I think that's the foundation.
Yeah, interesting. I want to tell you that there's a few people who are saying hi and asking questions. One person is Lisa Donna.
Lisa Donna, she's a synthesizer ace, I think.
No, she's a singer.
Oh, okay.
You came to her apartment in Boston to hand her Sheila Jordan's music. You said to listen to her. She did.
Okay.
And now she's a friend and mentor.
Oh, excellent. Well, you can't do any better than having Sheila Jordan as a friend and mentor.
That is true.
And hello, Lisa. I say hello to you.
Then Anthony Cucina, who's in New York, he's wondering who your main inspirations were coming up. And also he'd like you to talk about your book, Drum Wisdom, and how it relates to music today. So There you go. So who were your main inspirations? Let's start there, because that's the beginning.
Yeah, well, anything great was my inspiration. I just, when I heard something great, I'd say, yeah, I'd like to do something that great. I don't think I've achieved it yet, but I had a certain standard of greatness. It could be anybody. It could, for me also with music, the emotional component, in other words, the psychic component, has always been the most important thing to me.
Yeah.
So, you could say, like, for example, Sonny Rollins and John Coltrane are both great.
Yeah.
No question. I wouldn't say one is greater than the other. I say they're both masters of the highest level.
Yeah.
But Sonny Rollins' music didn't move me in the same way that Coltrane's music did.
Mm-hmm.
Coltrane's music changed my life. I felt it on a heart level, on a spiritual level.
Yeah.
Sonny always feels good to hear him. It's always great. Nothing but joyous, great saxophone playing.
Yeah.
And his rhythm stuff is amazing, his calypsos that he does and stuff. But in terms of being moved in the heart, that's always been how I react to music. So it never was about any particular genre. It might be like a gypsy, or like a flamenco, what's that guy, El Camarón, or it could be Aretha. That Aretha moved me. But I don't know if I can say influence, because I know it's not my job to play anything like Aretha or like El Camarón. It's just a standard of greatness, you see. You see who I'm wearing on my sweatshirt? That's Elvin.
Yeah.
I figured I represent Elvin. And
that's
for
great.
those who may not know, I grew up in the same building with Elvin, Max Roach, and Abby Lincoln, who was married to Max at the time, and Art Blakey. How about that for drum karma?
Wow.
And not only that, but Rahsaan Roland Kirk also lived in the building. But just as far as drummers,
wow,
man, the people I would see in the elevator, I see, Eric Dolphy and Reggie Workman and, Andrew Hill and all in the elevator. I never knew who I would run into,
Wow.
Of course, they would be coming up to visit one of the people. And people have asked me sometimes, like, what did I learn or what did I get from being in that environment? And this is the answer I came up with, more or less. I said I got two things. Basically, one is I learned right away what great is.
Yeah.
Because you hear 2 bars of Max Roach, you say, it's great. No question. 2 bars of Art Blakey, and you say, it's great. Hang on one second. Cue.
Okay, remember where we were.
I remember, Art Blakey. Hello? Sorry about that. I should turn the ringer off, but I don't usually get any phone calls, so I was surprised. So Max, Art Blakey, and Elvin, and Elvin, and one hit, and I know he's great, right? I mean, anybody who's great, from the first note, I think, generally.
Yeah.
Tisziji, my teacher, always said, all's well that begins well. And anybody who would say is great, if it's Billie Holiday or Sheila Jordan or Aretha Franklin or Jimi Hendrix, from the very first note, wow, you're like, wow.
I know. I have a theory about that. My theory is that the way to get into all of this is to go into what I call the aesthetic universe right away. So as soon as the music starts, you've put your hand on the doorknob and open the door, and you're in the musical universe, the aesthetic universe, which allows you to play with everybody. That's where the music is. It's not in this world, it's in this world. And so that's why the first note,
this world.
it's kind of hard to point to, but the first note tells you if the person's there or not. And that's where we want to go.
And also the level, obviously the people I just mentioned, there's a certain level that most musicians don't get to.
Yeah.
But so anyway, to finish what I was saying, so I learned what great was by being around these guys. But and that's important, because then I sit down at the drums and I go, oh, not great. I heard great. I know what great is. This is not great. Keep working at it. Keep working at it. And the other thing, and this is where people usually get off the bus, they don't seem to understand or agree, which they don't have to. Nobody has to agree with anything I say. But I said I also learned where I can't go. They said, what do you mean by that? And I said, I honor the people who inspired me by not stealing their stuff. By doing what they did, which is to go inward and find my own way. The truth is, I love Max, but I never wanted to play that way. Yeah. I loved Art Blakey, but I never wanted to play that way.
Yeah.
Elvin, I kind of did, man. I heard Elvin, I said, hey, that's how drums should sound, man. But you know, I sent you some CDs, you know, my current stuff. You know, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but did you hear anything that sounded like Elvin?
No.
Thank you. Now, I also say there's nothing on there that sounds as good as Elvin, but you know, I'm still working on it. You know, I'm still working on it, and maybe I'll never, because to me, he's in the top 3 of all time. But I don't say pride. Pride's not the right word. That's egoic. I'd say I take satisfaction in knowing that I can look in the mirror and say I'm standing on my own 2 feet.
Yeah.
I'm not taking anything from this guy who inspired me so much.
Yeah.
You know, because nobody played the drums like Elvin before he came.
Right.
Nobody played the piano like Bill Evans before he came. Nobody played the piano like McCoy Tyner before he came. Now you hear thousands of people who play a little bit like McCoy Tyner or a little bit like Bill Evans or something. And, you know, okay, if that's what they want to do, I wish them the best. But to me, that's not the way. And I think it's wrong on 2 levels. It's ethically wrong because it's stealing.
Yeah.
And secondly, it's a disempowerment of the individual who does that, because in a certain way they're saying, oh, I have nothing. I have no genius. I have no vision. So I have to take it from these past masters. Otherwise, I have nothing. And I think that's really sad to feel about yourself, especially at a young age. It's like giving up before you even start, you know. So I've spoken about this a lot, and I get most people don't agree or don't want to hear it, but I'm talking to you now, and I won't hold back, I think. So I was inspired by people, but I would say a lot of people, but not in any way to imitate. Inspiration, but no imitation.
Yeah. Do you think that was something that your parents gave you a perspective, or did it just was yours?
It seemed pretty obvious to me. Yeah. But I remember, you know, I was very close with Abby Lincoln, and she was very close with my parents and maintained a relationship with them until she passed, you know. And at one point, she sent me a CD of hers, and it was quite beautiful. It was mostly her compositions. And she had a great band on it, including Bobby Hutcherson, who was playing vibes and marimba. And I remember she did a beautiful version of that old jazz ballad, Midnight Sun. Your lips are like a red and ruby chalice, your bo 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 bida. And on that record, there's a young man, a trumpet player, who takes a beautiful, creamy jazz ballad trumpet solo. It's really well played, beautifully played. And I remember talking to her, and after I got the record, I said, oh, Amanata, because that's what I called it, Amanata. I said, I love that record. It's beautiful. Thank you. And that young trumpet player, he really sounds good, because I'd heard the name, but I'd never heard him play. And this is her word. Okay. She said, yeah, but Bobby, she said, his sound is too close to Clifford Brown. He said, if I'd known that, I never would have used him on my record. He said, you don't do that. You don't take somebody's sound. And I thought about it, and I went back and I hadn't listened to Clifford Brown in 30 years. I'd forgot, you know. And I listened to Clifford Brown playing a ballad, and I said, ooh, it's really close. And then I realized she was absolutely right. So that's the point of view of a real jazz musician. This is what the young generation, they're not coming from that. They want to take everybody's stuff and transcribe everybody's solo and copy all this stuff. But Abby Lincoln, she was beautiful. She said, look, I don't hate the kid, but if I'd known that, I never would have used him on my record. She said, you don't do that. And the interesting thing was, I'm not going to mention his name. Don't forget, I was praising him because he really did sound good. It's a great solo. Yeah. But I heard the same guy on another record that was more like a funk fusion record.
Yeah.
He sounded like Miles. So in other words, this guy's good enough technically, musically, that he can imitate just about anybody.
Yeah.
But I don't think he'll ever go down as one of the Miles or Clifford Brown or Don Cherry or Dizzy Gillespie, or who are unique, who are like the heroes because they came up with their own way of playing. And so that was Abby's word. And that's what I got from all the jazz musicians.
Yeah.
You know, I remember I had at one point the post office put out stamps of different jazz people. I still have them. I think they were 33 cents or something
Yeah.
when postage was. And they had Mingus, who was my teacher and mentor as well. But they had a Charlie Parker one, right? And but there's no stamp for Sonny Stitt. And Sonny Stitt could really play. I mean, he was great. In fact, the jazzers today, if they were half as good as Sonny Stitt, they should be happy, you know. But a lot of people put him down because they said he was too close to Bird.
Yeah.
And I remember Sonny Stitt saying, "I didn't imitate Bird. I was playing that way on my own," which was probably true. I tend to believe him.
Yeah.
But he got a lot of lack of respect because he was close in a way to Charlie Parker in concept. So that is the jazz ethos, which I'm not trying to push it on anybody, but these people are in school going to jazz department completely opposite of that. The jazz ethos was you don't take from anybody, or you'd get really really disrespected.
Yeah.
Maybe even kicked off the bandstand for doing that.
Yeah.
So I understood that from the get, that that's not the way to do it. Even though I have to admit, with Elvin, there was a temptation because I just loved how he played. And to me, when I'm at the drums, I said, man, I wish I could, you know, I'd like to sound like that a little bit. But not really. You hear what I'm doing. There's nothing from Elvin. I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, I think that, I mean, I know when I have, let's say, I have one record that I'm really digging, and I have it on, like I have it on the CD player, and I'm just playing it every day because I love it, you know, and it's so
Right.
and it's soaking in. And then when I go, definitely when I go to write, I notice that there's some flavor of what I've heard coming out. I'm not going to sound like those people, you know, but
Right.
I do have some of it. And I think, you know, I mean, they always say there's no original melody in the world, you know, but that's writing. But I think as an artist, I think people don't really know how to find themselves, you know. I mean, those guys were at least lucky to be playing a lot, you know,
True.
with each
True.
other and experimenting. Experimenting was cool.
Yeah.
So, but, and I actually, one question I wanted to ask you too was when I first became aware of you, I was in college, and like I was listening.
That long ago. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
all right.
it was like Time Stood Still, that record, and
Oh,
you know, When Elephants, something,
Right.
Elephants.
Dream of
Yeah.
music. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I was really, I don't know what came first, you or Weather Report for me, but that was where I was really turned on. That the rhythm, the harmonies, the combination of different personalities with the different instruments, but space. You know, I mean, there was just so much to it that I loved. And I'm just
Thank you.
wondering if that. So, one question I wanted to ask you is when that influence in yourself came up stronger, because you probably were, like you said, when you were 15, you were playing with salsa bands. And so probably after that, you were playing some straight ahead gigs or weddings or, you know, that kind of stuff. And then at some point you started to go, no, I want to feel this and I want to feel that. And again, getting back to what you were talking about, how does one teach a person to find themselves, you know?
That's a great question, because I don't think, I think you're exactly right. It's not easy, but that's all the more reason why you have to do it. But for me too, I think, you know, and this is where I differ from you, is when I hear something that I really, really love,
yeah,
I don't listen to it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because maybe once, sure. Otherwise, I wouldn't know that I love it if I hadn't heard it at least once, you know.
Yeah.
But no, because it has a strong gravitational pull, and I don't want to be pulled. I mean, I think of all the jazz, quote, quote, jazz musicians, I think the one that the most profound effect on me is Coltrane. But I hardly ever listen to Coltrane, almost never, because it's so strong, it pulls me, and I don't want to be pulled there. I respect it, but I gotta go. I have to go my own way. So I think part of it is like less always looking out and more looking in. It's a directional thing. People are always looking out, everything. And I did a lot of that when I was younger, no question about it. I feel that my evolution, and this is largely thanks to my teacher, Tisziji, my spiritual teacher, has been to get away from, or let go of, not get away from, let go of my attachment to various forms of let's say, black music. African-derived music, because I always was drawn to the drum and African-derived music. And that includes jazz, R&B, funk, samba, salsa, Afro-Rican, Afro-Cuban,
Yeah.
as well as other, Indian music and Middle Eastern music and the flamenco and basically anything that had the cry, that's what I like that. So I understand that it was part of my process, and it was important, especially for white people. If you're going to get down with jazz or any form, you can't ignore African-based music.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's for my personal liberation, I had to let go of it.
Yeah.
You can still feel the flavor of it even in my free playing. I think so. This is my own, when I hear my own playing, which is more, like I say, out of time, free, it's still kind of danceable, because I did spend so much time, as I said, with the danceable music. So I think that's a good thing. And I'm also generalizing now too, but there's a difference, kind of a general difference between European avant-garde and, let's say, the Black American avant-garde.
Yeah.
In other words, when I hear Rashid Ali, it still sounds like he's swinging.
Yeah.
When I hear Milford Graves, it has this African flavor to it. The European, and I'm generalizing, there's plenty of great European free drummers that I admire. In fact, I made a list of some of my favorite percussionists now. Most of them are non-American, European, or from wherever country. But a lot of it was more like, that kind of stuff, which, by the way, can be great, can be beautiful. But my free playing is more like, right? So that's not in time. There's no resolution. There's no grid. There's not, but it does have a kind of native flavor, and that's more how I tend to play free. Although I like to do spacey stuff sometimes too, but it tends to be more danceable like that. So, and when I do that, there's never any repetition because I've never sang that before, and I'll never sing that again.
Yeah.
And the next time it'll be something new. It might be shaga uga wakaiki shuga kechukachi kumba shaka acha usha ikubashia hasu ichacha uwa eshebu bayada duda. So I like the fact that when I hear myself, I don't hear any ethnicity at all. I've left. I don't sound like black music, but I don't sound like white music either. It's like. So I'm starting to like what I'm doing finally after, playing like over 60 years. I'm starting to dig it. Although, it still needs a lot of work. I want to get better. I want to keep pushing. Everything to me is a stepping stone. Like you get one thing and you go to the next thing, and then you stay with that thing, and you go to the next thing. What's kind of interesting is the songs that I'm writing these days are almost all of them are no bar lines, right? Rubato, okay. Yeah. In fact, I'll send you a couple because you talked about collaborating, and there's a song, I'll explain it to you more later, but there's a song that, actually, I'll tell the story. I write a song every Christmas. Okay. And this is because years ago, Steve Swallow, the great bassist, who's also a great composer, and is married to Carla Bley, who's also a great composer.
Yeah.
He said to me something along the lines. He said, "Man, you are a great composer, And I remember saying, I don't think so. I said, you're a great composer. He said, no, you really are. He said, you should write more. And then I remember saying something like, well, Swallow, I've got 500 tunes, these envelopes in my hallway, because I do it old school on paper, no computer and stuff. And 490 of them have never been played and probably never will. Do I really need more paper on the floor? And he said, no, it doesn't matter. You should do it anyway. I said, oh, okay. He said, promise me you write a song every Christmas. And he didn't remember. I did talk to him recently and reminded him. Of course, he didn't remember that he had said that. But I actually honored that. It's come from Steve Swallow. I love him, and he's such a great composer and a great bass player. And so I've written a song every Christmas, And most of them recently, and they're always, in fact, I got to do one soon. I'm cheating. I started a few days before Christmas because I figured I might not get it all done in one day. It's kind of an assignment, so I take it seriously. And some of them, sometimes I don't feel creative at all on Christmas, and it's really a strain to write something, but I force myself to do it. And those ones tend to come out a little weird, but most of them are really quite beautiful in their own way. They're all like prayer. Everything I do these days in composition is for the purpose of bringing people to prayer, to heart center when they play them. And the one I did in 2016, or maybe it was 2017, I don't remember now, is called Peace Universal, and it's one of my favorite. And again, it's written with no bar line, no key signature. Every time I need a F sharp, I write a F sharp. If it's F natural, I write nothing. So there's no key signature, no time signature, no bar lines, no chord changes, no harmonic indication, no tempo, obviously, or anything. So that, in other words, it's encouraging maximum freedom and creativity from whoever plays it. The only clue really is in the title. In other words, I had one guy who's kind of more of a jazz straight ahead playing one of my songs. He said, I don't know what to do. I said, well, play the title. This one is called Blessings, Joyous, or Blessings of Joy, multiple blessings. It's a multitude of blessings, so it's happy. This one is called One with Infinite Space, so it's like this, The title will tell you how to do it. But anyway, the funny thing is with these songs, I think it's funny. I rarely get to play them live. I rarely have a band these days, but a few times I've had a few very talented young people who played my music, including a young woman from Brazil named Gaia Wilmer, who's a fantastic composer and improviser. And she plays alto sax and baritone and a few people. But they're rubato, right? But I count them off, which is kind of funny. I have a tune, for example, called The Lioness. And I count that kind of as a kind of elven boom, chicka boom, a big ba ba bo bo ba ba baby, ba bo baby, ah be bo be ah yo, ba ba bo be bo be ba bo be di do di ble ble wa wa bo ba ba do da do di do bo be do. So it's free, but in other words, all rubato is different from all other rubato. So it sets a different flavor. I have another one called Song of the Free Will, and I count that one more bright, more like a up-tempo swing, like two, baba do be da, booba de be de be, baba do be do be be wa, be do be we wa, be do be de ba boo be boo be bo be do ba be boo bang 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 bang. So it's a starting point. It's kind of like a count off to jumping off a cliff.
Can I just say something?
Sure.
When you just showed that, I heard your old recordings.
Oh.
You did that in your old recordings too.
Probably, yeah. I mean, I'm evolving, but the roots of what I'm doing now have always been there. I mean, the inclination to be free has always been there. Even when I was in my groove and world music period and funk period and whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the names of the songs, but I know this one song that really reminds me of that you did, and you had this kind of a drum beat underneath, and the sounds were like yeah, that kind of thing with this underlying thing. See, that's what I loved.
Oh, thank you. Well, yeah, there's certain, we can compositionally, I think I've always tried to come up with things that are a little unusual, but they shouldn't be unusual because there's nothing that radical about them. But when I was writing, I never felt obligated that everybody had to be in the same tempo.
Yeah.
I mean, who made that rule? I didn't agree to it. I didn't get a vote. So I have pieces going back like on Elephant's Dream of Music or Visit with the Great Spirit, where, in fact, I did a version of Bahia, that old song,
Yeah.
Coltrane. It's a Brazilian song.
Yes.
Coltrane did a version of it, too. But I had the underpinning, the rhythm was like a pretty bright 7. It was kind of like, and the melody was really slow.
Yeah, yeah.
Yo ba boo be underneath, and I thought, yeah, why do they have to be in the same? I mean, one of the earliest tunes I ever wrote when I was at a group called Open Sky with Dave Liebman. We had various different bass players, but it was a tune called Amy, which was written for a friend of mine, a sweet woman that I knew, and I had the rhythm, the bass and the drums playing really fast. Oh, okay, my camera went dark. Now it's back. Oh, it got dark again. I don't know. Do I need a new battery? I'm not sure what to do. Well, I look probably better in the dark anyway. Anyhow, yeah, the drums and bass were like really fast, basically as fast as we could play. And the melody was something like be-a bo ba ba be-a boo 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 with this underneath. And I wanted to maintain that for the whole piece, even in the improvising. I wanted the improvising to be kind of slow and broad, and the rhythm section to stay super bright. So that's not, that's something I've been doing, since I was a teenager. I often hear things, and sometimes when I even wrote things where the tempos are close, and that's a really interesting effect. Because, in other words, not one thing is really slow and one thing is really fast. There's a tune on When Visit Great Spirits called Machu Picchu. And the bass line is like, ba ba do ba, da boo ba, da be de doo doo, ba ba do ba, da be be boo ba doo doo, da be do ba, da boo ba, da de de be a do ba, da de de do. By the way, resolution is on the and of 4. But then the melody was just a little bit slower. It's like do da dee oh, and so the way that melody floats over that bass line, it's really magic. And you couldn't write that, in all in the same time. It's impossible. So I like things like that. That to me, that's like then the music becomes more like actual life, because in life we have different tempo things. You got a waterfall running, then you got the clouds moving really slow, or you're on the street and you got some kids running really quick, and then you got some old person moving really slow, and then somebody is playing opera on the radio, and then somebody goes by with some rap shit in a completely different tempo. And reality is multi-level. So why not include that in the music? So I've often done that. And these days with these songs too, like I'm working on a duo record with a great pianist from the Netherlands. His name is Mike Roloffs. He's the best pianist I've heard since Steve Kuhn. He's a really genius cat, and he's been recording a lot of my melodies, but I'm not there to count off. We're not playing it live or anything. And he invariably plays them much slower than I would. But they're beautiful, and I love that. I purposely don't tell him anything. I want to see so he can be completely himself. And then he sends me versions and I play along with them. And then we're doing a record that way. I've got a couple of projects like that, that in the age of COVID and it's hard to travel and everything. We do long distance recordings, but I love how he's playing the pieces, and it forces me to play in a way that I don't usually play, which is to slow my energy down. It's more peaceful, more classical in a way, playing with him, but it's beautiful.
That's amazing. I'm curious. Alex asked about your book. Do you still use that book, and how do you feel like it relates? It still relates?
Well, it's good. I think if people understand what it is, it's very good practice.
Yeah.
The problem is, by the way, for anyone's interested, it's about to be reissued.
Oh, cool.
Because right now I have like one copy or maybe two copies or something, and it's been kind of unavailable. Although people have stole it plenty. I can see it online, PDFs and stuff, which I never asked me permission or that I got a dime. But I guess that's current times are like that a lot.
Yeah.
People just take stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But I did talk with a guy from Modern Drummer, and they're actually going to reissue the book. They're going to make physical copies and also have it downloadable. Just, you know. The thing about the book is that a lot of times I get a lot of praise for the book, and people compliment me all the time, and oh, that book is great, and it helped me, and it changed my life. And of course, I'm happy to hear that. But almost invariably, when I talk to people, and they show me what they're doing from the book, they didn't get it. And it was really hard to put into words, you know, music, because really music is either to be played or sung, right? You know, it's much easier to communicate it. So, for example, I had a guy who said, yeah, I work in the resolution points. I'm doing you know, I do one, and then I do for 2 bars, and then I do and a 1 for 2 bars, and I do 2 for 2 bars. I said, that's completely opposite of what it's intended to. The idea is to be able to, really, the book is very simple, very basic stuff. Yeah. Although it has it can go to infinite possibilities if you take it that far. Yeah. Basically, it's like what I was saying that I learned from these crazy Puerto Rican guys when I was a kid, is how to play danceable groove that people could dance to and improvise on that and still be creative. And I noticed with most danceable music, there's at least an element of repetition, right? It doesn't have to be exact repetition, right? Although that's what a lot of hip hop, they get a 2-bar thing and they just loop it. And unless it's really great killer, it's after a while, it's like Chinese water torture, like the same exact stuff over and over. So what I like to do is be able to keep the essence of the groove, but yet improvise on it. So that's really all most of it. I mean, there's a few things in the book, I think, but the main thing of the book is improvising on the different resolution points, but staying on each one long enough, like a meditation, and getting it nice. Verbally and dancing it. Another thing too is they immediately go to the drums. This is a singing exercise. You already heard me. I did a 1 for you. I did 2 for you. You know, I can do and a 4. So on and so forth. You see, it's not boring, but yet I am sticking to that and a 4. And that, I think, what's happening with my camera? That's the discipline. That's really what the book is about.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like too many people have actually applied. I hope they do, because I know that's useful. It's basically like theme and variation rhythmically. Yeah. But it should have a melodic component too, because the drums are almost never just monotone. Yeah. Right. It may not be exact notes that you get on the piano, but the drums are pitched. You know, there's a high and low and everything in between. Yeah. So that's really what the book is about. There's a few other things that are in the book too, and you know, in exploring danceable music, I had a group in the late 80s, early 90s called Mozamba. Uh-huh. And we played dance music. We were considered like a world beat band. We played all kind of grooves, but we get some serious dancers. We get some Africans and Brazilians, and some real great dancers would come and dance to Mozambique. It was very much a percussion band, a rhythm band, you know.
Uh-huh.
But we evolved. In the beginning, we used a lot of vamps. In other words, we'd have repetition, some element of repetition. But we'd improvise on the vamp, but we had a repetitive structure. And then, like I said before, everything is a stepping stone. So I wanted to get to a place where we could still be funky but not have any repetition, not be another. There's another way which you could call stream of consciousness. In other words, ever changing, no particular resolution point, and still be funky. And I heard examples of that. Let's say when I heard the Neville Brothers and the Funky Meters and stuff, and especially down in New Orleans, they were super funky, danceable, but they were improvising like stream of consciousness, more like jazz musicians do. Yeah. So here's an example of that. And I would have everybody in the band doing that too. Like the bass player doing that, the guitar, other percussionists. So there's no particular resolution, but hopefully somewhat funky, which is hard for me these days because I'm playing mostly free music, but I can sort of remember what funk was. So like, okay, here we go. Shunk ticka ticka ish back to the on diddy back to the on to get back to the on ticka ish diddy on ticka diddy back to the on to the on to the on to the on to get ish and the bass boom beating on bump diddy bump bump guitar waka waka battle at can't the horns battle at booted up so that's like stream of consciousness, but we all stayed in the eighth note. We all stayed in the grid. That's what kept it funky partly. And we get people dancing to that. So I also, because I do like harmony, you know, from my composition, I like harmony. That was another thing. In the early days of Mozambique, they were mostly vamps. And I have found that it's easier to get a groove, a danceable groove, when the harmony is kind of static or simple, two chords.
Yeah.
When I was playing with a Puerto Rican guy, everything was like, two chords, basically.
Yeah.
So once I found the key, I could improvise pretty easy on it. Yeah. But I love harmony too. So that was another part of the evolution, was to be able to include, there wasn't only vamps. So we had different beautiful harmonies, but still be funky, still be danceable, which is harder. And that's why jazz sometimes doesn't sound as danceable or funky, because it's always moving harmony, right? It's chord to chord to chord, changing chords. Whereas when you have a harmonic repetition that's shorter, it tends to make it more danceable. But again, we kept evolving. To me, that's what I say. Everything is a stepping stone, you know?
Yeah. Hey, Lisa Donna asked, do you play the Persian daf drum?
Oh, right. Yeah. Now I'm remembering where. No. The truth is, there was one at this, what was it called? Third Life Studio, I think, something like that, in Somerville. And I would play there occasionally, and they had one. And whenever I was there, I'd ask, is it okay? It was in the dressing room. They had it up on the wall. I said, it's okay if I borrow that? And they, oh, sure. And I would play it, and I loved it. And then I bought one online, and I didn't love it as much as the one that was at this place. So I found it harder to get out of it what I wanted to get out of it. And so I wound up selling it because I was broke. I know this guy who buys stuff. He's like a pack rat. His house is like stacked with instruments, and so sometimes I want to, also my place over the years is too busy, too cluttered. I'll call him up. His name is Michael. I say, Mike, why don't you come over? I'll sell you some of my stuff. And I got rid of most of my LPs. I had thousands of LPs.
Oh, wow.
He bought them too. But I think he took the DAF,
Yeah.
But it is a great instrument, and it's not easy to play. The one that was at that studio, which I think is closed now, unfortunately, it was one of the places one of the few places you could play kind of free or more non-commercial music at.
Yeah.
Man, I love that one. I used to play that one all the time, you know.
Hey, speaking of music, I would like to go and find a little bit of music to play for people. So I'm going to go to YouTube here. I found out when we were first talking about you being on that there's another Bob Moses group, and they're like kind of progressive rock, I think, right?
Yeah. I know about them. Yeah.
But it would
I'm
be
not
nice to
feeling their
hear
music too
you.
much. What's
No,
that?
no. It'd be nice to hear you play. Oh my God! Here's Jim Hall, Steve Swallow, and you. That must have been a while ago.
Yeah, that was in Germany in 1968, I believe.
Wow. Well,
Yeah, I love playing with that's Steve when he was still playing the acoustic bass is so beautiful, and Jim Hall is a very very
gosh,
special cat.
do you mind if I play a little bit of that? I'd love to see a little of that.
Yeah, it's pretty. It's pretty. I mean, I'm nothing special on it, but I think I managed to not mess it up. Put it that way.
I'm sure it's better than that. But the thing is, and also I would like to, even if it's on Spotify or something, but I'd like to hear more of like, the Elephants record or the Time record, or something newer. I don't know the new stuff that well, but
the Elephants, that's not new. That's 84 or something.
I know, but newer than this.
I sent you didn't I send you some of the new stuff? I think so.
You mean
didn't I send you some CDs? Yeah.
Yeah, you sent me a lot.
Okay. Yeah, don't feel obligated to listen to all of it, but I'm pretty sure I sent you some new stuff as well as some older stuff.
Yeah, you did, and also you sent me some of I can never pronounce his name. Tisziji,
yeah.
Tisziji, yeah. And wow, and I really was intrigued by hearing him like play very intensely and kind of edgy, and then the next song would be this real beautiful, quiet, spacious thing. That was really very beautiful.
Yeah, well, that is the music of my heart. That Tisziji, and he is my teacher and liberator. Not that I consider myself liberated, but I'm a lot more than I used to be.
Well, I definitely would like to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I'd love to.
I mean,
love to.
Let me play a little bit of this because I'm curious. Let's see, here we go. Herbie Moses.
Yeah. Well, I was a kid.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah,
really beautiful. Yeah,
really
and
pretty.
you're very light and swinging, and then there's something like you here at a festival. I don't know if this is a solo thing or.
I don't either. I don't know.
Let's see. It's.
The first drum I got was given to me by my godfather.
And then you're talking. So that's okay. I actually wanted to hear more of some singing thing. I mean, playing.
Oh,
But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I wonder if I can just pull you up on Spotify just for fun here, because I wanted to show maybe what I was listening to. This is Bob Moses. Oh, there's so many of these things. Many things. When Elephants Dream. There we go. Yep, I know this record really well. Yeah. Yeah.
Gene Lee.
Oh, cool. I'm going to stop a little early because it goes 5 minutes. But boy, I mean, that's the kind of stuff. Actually, that was where Embraceable Jew was from, where I first
Right.
learned Embraceable Jew.
Yeah, right. Well, that's a good kind of a compositional exercise that many jazz people did, is to rewrite the standards. To base your new song on the standard. And
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
a song, the original "Embraceable You," of course, one of my favorites. So.
Right.
And I remember I asked Steve Kuhn for the changes to it, and will tell the new generation too how serious it is, because I remember he said, okay, well, whose do you want? You want Bud Powell's? You want Bill Evans? You want mine? You want Art Farmer's? In other words, there is no one set of changes, but so many of the new people, they learn it all from the real book, and they think that's the chords.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to Kuhn, give me a potpourri. So it was a combination. He gave me the chords, and then I wrote my own melody on that. Yeah.
That was, I mean, it's so great. We've talked about this before, but so I sang that on a record with a piano player, and it's in my book. But what the record was so intriguing because it was, every instrument did like 2 to 4 notes, something like that.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
And for the longest time, I wasn't sure if everybody had played the whole thing and then you had edited it, but you said no, they actually played it like that, which is
right.
Pretty amazing, I think.
Well, you know what I did? I color coded it. I gave each horn player their own color. So I would pick, I think there was 5 people, so I would give green, then I do the 6th note would get green again, and then whatever the 11th note would get whatever the 6th note after that, 12th note would be green. And so you only played the green notes, and then somebody else had blue or red, and they'd only play it took a little practice because people weren't used to giving that much space, but
yeah.
I just wanted the melody to move around. I wanted to go like that. It did work. I actually had a sung version of it by a great jazz singer. He's one of my all-time favorite singers that a lot of people don't know about. His name is Marion Cowings.
Oh, I know him.
Yeah, he's a great singer.
So he sang that too?
He sang it. Yes, he did. And I mean, we only had 2 days of recording, and that whole record, there was a lot of people coming in and out. And honestly, just his version, I think we only did 1 take. It just wasn't quite up to snuff,
Yeah.
And so I didn't include it on the record as a favor to him. I don't want to put anybody on my record that's less than their best. If you record for me, you'll know that I'm going to protect you. But that means edit brutally. But that's a kindness, actually, because only the best. Even Jay Clayton on the last thing that she's on, I picked certain phrases, other ones I let go, but the phrases that she's in are just like gold. And I do that on myself too. I'm absolutely brutal in my editing, which I think is a kindness. But so unfortunately, the vocal version didn't make it. It's just instrumental.
Yeah.
But yeah, he did sing it, and he's a great. And how did you get the lyrics? I think the lyrics were.
No, I actually did not sing the lyrics.
Okay, that's right. I forget. I haven't heard it in a while.
Yeah, I just sang vocalies with the pianist.
It has lyrics to it. It has lyrics. I'll send it to you sometime.
Yeah, please do.
As a friend of mine wrote them. I think she also a singer, Toni Wilson. She was from Washington, D.C. I don't know where she lives now, but we did become Facebook friends again. I'm kind of in touch with her.
By the way, Jay Clayton is on.
Is she?
Yep.
Oh, I love you, Jay. I love you so much. I'm so happy you're watching me. We got to talk soon.
I can't wait to hear what you two come up with. Boy, it's going to be great.
Oh, she's one of my all-time favorite, and I think without being in any way imitative, she's got her own thing. She carries on the spirit of Gene Lee, who was one of my favorite collaborators over the years.
Yeah, I think she had the vocal summit with Gene Lee as well. Jay said, "I love you more."
Well, thank you. That's you know, you're okay by the quality of the people who love you, you know.
That is so true.
And so, you know, and by the way, I sent you a bunch of CDs. Did I ever send you the one that had Gene Lee and Sheila Jordan singing together, free?
I don't think so.
Oh, I got, if I did, it's called Vintage Visionary Vignettes.
Wow.
It was recorded, I don't even remember, I think late 70s in New York. It's completely, you know. But there's a bunch of duets and trios with the two of them singing free, and it's beautiful.
Wow.
Beautiful. It was
Cool.
great. I think it's, as far as I know, it's the only recording of those two together.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like singing free more and more and more, you know, and especially if COVID hadn't popped up, it would have been really, I would have been having fun because I have a really quirky, great group with that percussionist I was telling you about, Brad Dukes.
I saw a little bit of him. I didn't get a whole tune, but what I saw was the same kind of trailer that you showed of me for that music video that I did called Living Music.
Yeah.
The same company. It's called My Masterclass.
Oh.
Did one on him.
Oh.
So, you know, again, I mean, it's, you know how it is, like 10 seconds, 15 seconds of this, and it cuts.
Yeah.
Because they want to show a lot of what he does in 2 minutes. It's a trailer. But the little bit I heard was beautiful. He was demonstrating, combining electric and acoustic percussion. And it was beautiful sounds and very creative. And so I like to hear more of him, but I was impressed with what I heard. And maybe we'll hopefully get in touch and do something long distance, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm going to send you a copy of some of my tunes, particularly this one, Peace Universal.
Okay.
And if you want to do a version, again, there's no bar lines. It's open, completely open.
Yes.
And you can overdub on yourself or whatever, or you play other instruments. You can play whatever. It doesn't have to be just vocal, but I know that's mostly what you do.
Yeah.
Right now, I only have a couple of vocalists. I have enough for a double album already, so it's like not like I need more material, but I'd like to hear what you do if you enjoy it. And it's one of my Christmas compositions, I think, from 2017, called Peace Universal.
Right, that's cool.
The only singers I have on there are actually, one is a young lady who's kind of an up-and-comer. She's from Korea. Her name is Won Mi. And she did a really good version. I had to edit it, but it's good. And then there's one that's a masterpiece by Theo Bleckman.
Oh,
and he's genius singer, composer, singer.
He is genius.
He's brilliant. And he did an incredible version with like 8 overdubs in it. And it's so, that's the, you know, so I have people from, the idea was to do a double album of one song.
Oh, wow.
And because it was one that I particularly liked, I sent it to people. If they were in the Boston area, they'd come here and we'd record them right here with my engineer. But if they were somewhere else, they would get either a home recording or go into a studio. So I have people from Italy, Ecuador, Brazil, Puerto Rico, Germany, Korea, you know, the Netherlands, Denmark.
Wow, cool.
You know, and some who are pretty well known and famous, like Dave Liebman and Bill Frisell and Steve Swallow, and Gil Goldstein did one on the accordion. It's just beautiful, man. And
what a great idea. And
some that are not, that you wouldn't know. They're younger people, but everyone kind of a visionary player in their own right. And people that I have I have this trumpet player from Bulgaria, Rahsaan Zahariev. He did a beautiful one. And so I'll send you that piece if you'd like to give a shot at it.
I'd love to.
Yeah.
Bill Goodwin is here, and he said you're always an inspiration.
Oh man, Bill Goodwin, I love you, man. You're a great drummer and a great person, and I always thought so. And I've been inspired by you. And whenever I hear you play, I often wish that I had your taste, because you never play anything that doesn't fit, and I wish I could say the same. Yeah,
that's cool. Hey, I wanted to ask you about Tisziji, and Tisziji, and I'm sure you have a lot to say about him. But does that have anything to do with what you said before about during the week you would be really quiet, like not listen to music?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think these days, because people ask like a similar question to what's your influence. So people might say, where is your music coming from?
Yeah.
And I think the most accurate answer is it comes from silence at this point,
Ah,
which is not a concept most drummers can relate to. But I when you were playing some of the stuff and you asked about Tisziji, I just picked up one of his books, right? And this is random, right? I didn't pre-choose it. I'll read just a little bit. This one is called The Burn Code Mantra. Its Key to Realization by Tisziji Munoz. This is page 3, but it's, slowly and peacefully breathe empty silence. Be peaceful, clear silence. Be its perfection. Hear the infinite silence of perfection. Hear the infinite perfection of silence. Be absorbed in selfless, loving silence. Hear the perfection of silence. Only effortless breathing of thoughtless silence is greatness. Only realization of aloneness, nowness, in the form of the heart is the universe, is practicing mastery. Hear out into infinity, know beyond infinity. See deep into a 360-degree vision of infinity. Breathe the pure and full sound of divine hue. See and know the full light of all transcending hue. That's just a little excerpt. Deep, right? From everything he says is like that. He talks like that. He lives that way. That's the thing, because I've known him for over 40 years, and he's been 100% that. What you heard, he lives it 24/7. And not only that, he also happens to be by far the greatest musician I ever heard, and I think that's almost the least of it, of what he is. Because there's many, many great musicians, but I don't know any other that are actually a spiritual master.
yeah.
Certainly not me.
What you just read and what I heard of him, it's totally the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is his lyrics. His books are his lyrics.
Yeah.
And the music is, the non-word representation of it. And I get just as high from reading the book as I do from hearing the music. It's exactly the same vibe. And if you're around him, that's what it is, there's nothing has been more important to me in my life than my association with him. And nobody has helped me more. Nobody has, let's say, had the wisdom and the responsibility to step in and help. But also, and this is important, never before I asked for it. Because in the early days I knew Tisziji, I just was there for the music. Because the first time, the way I met him, there's a piano player. It was one of my early playing buddies named John Weiss. His spiritual name now is Satadiak. Quite a good piano player and a good cat. And he told me one time when I don't remember, he said, "Yeah, you love Coltrane." I said, yeah, that's my stuff. Coltrane is, my hero, whatever. He said, okay, so if you love Coltrane, you should meet this guitar player. And he's somewhat of a guru, he said to me too. So he's warning me, And I went to his house. At that time, he lived in the Lower East Side, Funky, off of the Bowery in New York. And from the first time I heard him play, I knew there's something really unique that I never heard before. And I remember saying to him something that I don't think I've ever said to anybody else. I said, anytime you need me to play, if you want me to play with you, I will come anywhere for no money, just because of what I get from the experience. You don't need to pay me. In fact, if I need to pay to go there, if you got a gig in Alaska and I have to buy a plane ticket, I'll go. And I never said that to anybody. And I don't think, only one time did I actually miss a gig that he, in 40 years, that he's asked me to play, So that was my feeling. But the thing is, it took me almost 20 years later before I was ready to come to him for spiritual help. And he never told me anything about my playing, which was often really wrong, or my behavior, which also was, really not too good at times,
No.
until I came to him. And it was one time of the period of the biggest, like I would call it, sufferation in my life. My life was really bad on every level. Relationships, terrible. Music, finances, all of that. And I used to think that also I had the worst luck. I was like Job from the Bible times 10. You know how musicians get around and tell road stories about horrors of things that happen on the road, and everybody goes and says, well, let me tell you what happened to me. After I would tell my stories, nobody would say anything. They would say, that's the worst shit I ever heard. I got nothing. And I almost took a pride in it of being, and of course now I realized that it wasn't bad luck at all. It was all self-created karma. It's one of the things I learned from Tisziji is that the self is the source of all suffering.
Yeah.
And so we could say good news and bad news. You know, the bad news is, oh shit, I'm the asshole that's causing all the problems. And the good news is it's also within me to fix it and make it better and stuff.
That's right. That's right.
So it took a long time before I came to him. Tisziji often said too, he said, a spiritual being tries to change nothing and no one. So you had to come. And I came to him and he knew it was sincere, that I was really hurting. And I said, Bapu, that's what we call him, Bapu, for Bapuji, means kind of spirit father, the Holy Father or something. And I said, can I come together with no drums, no guitar, no music, just to sit? Because I know I need help and I know you could help me. And he waited almost 20 years. He didn't say nothing to me about that. Wow. And then I sat with him, I think the first time we sat for 18 hours. And, you know, after 12 hours, I'm sitting like this and he's still like perfectly upright, perfectly relaxed. Every word is like perfect dharma, like the book, and precise, not extra word. I mean, and eventually he said, you look a little tired, you know, maybe you should rest. He didn't need to rest. I needed to rest after 18 hours. So finally I laid down. Like 3 hours later, he's over my head ringing the bell. Wake up. I was like, oh, man. You know, so, you know, I realized, oh, I'm in spiritual boot camp now. And one of the things he told me in the early days, too, he said, spiritual practice is impossible. That's why you have to do it. So he certainly wasn't sugarcoating it or making it sound like it's easy to do. And for me, my particular karma, it's been extremely difficult. But I have noticed so many more. I'm much happier and much freer. You know, let's see. One of the many things he teaches, which is not unique to him. I mean, most of the spiritual practice will, different traditions will say this. He called it the 5 fingers of darkness. Let me get it right now. It's like anger, lust, greed, vanity, and attachment. Now, greed was never my thing. I wasn't too much. Vanity, hardly, you know, maybe. Attachment, I guess a little bit. But anger, oh yeah, big time. And lust, yeah, big time. And so, but if you know me now at all, I have no anger at all. And very little lust. Every once in a while I think about it. That's about as far as it goes, you know. No action that way. I haven't had sex with anybody for over 20 years at least.
Oh, wow.
And no relationships that way with anybody. And I feel totally happy that way. I feel there's enough of my own karma that I have to clear out without taking on anybody else's karmic baggage, because everybody has them, men and women, everybody has karmic baggage, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm still working on cleaning out my own, and I still have a lot of work to do. I would say my progress in terms of spiritual practices, I'm kind of at the foot of the mountain, looking up at the top and going, oh man, I got a long way to go. But
you're at the foot of the mountain, right?
At least I see the mountain.
I
see it. Yeah, that's a big help. And one thing which I think is really profound is I had a very dysfunctional relation with my dad, right? When I was really young, we got along okay because we bonded over sports. You know, I was kind of an athlete when I was a kid. We played ball together and stuff. But basically from school age on, we were like at each other's throats, you know. Fortunately, I was great with my mom. My mom was, you know, my best friend, and I was always cool with her and her side of the family. But my dad, oh man, And Tisziji has this piece called Fatherhood, by the way, which is one of his best compositions.
Huh.
And whenever we do a gig together, he would always play that. I would request it because it was for healing between the fathers' relationship. So he knew this, and I had moved my dad up to Quincy because he was very ill. He was in really poor health, and he lived in New York his whole life, and then later in Long Island. But I moved him up to Quincy so I could help do things for him. And Tisziji, who lived in Schenectady at that time, drove all the way from Schenectady to Quincy to meet my dad. That's like 4 hours, something. And not only that, but my father's environment was extremely toxic, because not just psychically, but physically, because he smoked this pipe that was 10 times worse than any cigarette. And he smoked it 24/7. He did this when I was a kid. My mom would cook these beautiful meals, and he would go to the other side of the house because he smoked a pipe while he was eating. We couldn't even eat in the same room with him.
Wow.
And even towards the end, I would bring him food, but I could never share a meal with him because the ceiling was yellow. And not only that, they kept the windows closed and the thermostat on 90. So it was like hell. I would take my clothes off, not naked, but all my outer clothes off in the hallway before I went into his place, because otherwise I'd have to put them in the dry cleaner. They would stink of this tobacco. And he smoked some pipe tobacco is kind of pleasant, like a cherry. The kind he smoked was called Barking Dog. That was his brand, man. It was foul. And Tisziji is very sensitive to any kind of external stimulus, and extremely sensitive. So I asked my dad, I said, could you not smoke for like a half a day or a day, which for my dad was big. Could you open a window? And he actually did, which for my dad was a big stretch. But the place still stunk. I mean, it was unfixable, really. And Tisziji made the trip. And I remember how it started. When you meet with Tisziji, I can't predict it because it's always new. And it's always appropriate for the person who's there. But almost always I've seen he gives you a chance to ask questions or to vent or to bring up your issues. He would say, do you have anything, or what do you have questions, or do you have issues that you want to? And my dad started kind of venting about the fact that when I was a kid, our house was open to all these jazz musicians, great people, great artists, but many of them were really cuckoo and dysfunctional themselves. And we fed them, we clothed them, we supported them. It was like an oasis for all these people. Even people who weren't musicians. We had some young black girl who was living with us, she was already at 16. She was a hooker and on heroin, and we got her clean and supported her for a couple of years, got her in school, and so that's what my parents were doing, right? And my dad was saying that he said, now, when my wife, that's my mom, was sick, she had already passed when Tisziji came, but she had like a 14-year kind of health descent. And now that I'm really sick and frail, none of these people call. None of these people say thank you or how you doing or anything like that. And he said, and I'm really bitter about it. I'm really resentful about it. And it was true. And Tisziji calmly listened to that. And I can testify this is true. The one exception, by the way, was Abby Lincoln, who did stay in touch and was sweet with my dad, my mom and dad, after they left New York and everything. Yeah. But almost all these great musicians never. And so Tisziji listened, and he said, and he just looked at my father and he said, well, I came to see you. And my father was nothing if not intelligent. He was a really smart cat. He often used it as a weapon, but he was a very smart cat. He said, he realized in a second that really the greatest of all these people, those guys were great musicians, but they weren't spiritual masters. Most of them were selfish, self-centered artists, And not only that, he's maybe even a better artist. I mean, I listened to his music before I listened to any of these people that I grew up with. He's the greatest guitar player I ever heard by far. And I've played with some really great guitar players. And so my dad realized, man, this great man came to visit me. And I just felt that this 40 years of resentment just fell off his shoulders. It was like a boulder
Wow.
just fell off. I could see it happening. It's like healing, like instant healing.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, the visit, Tisziji kissed my father's hand. Oh no, excuse me. My father kissed Tisziji hand.
Oh.
And Tisziji said to me, anybody who would kiss this old funky Puerto Rican hand is a great man. He said, your father is a great man. And he told me what I needed to do. And I always listen to Tisziji because he's never been wrong. Not once. Everything he said has been correct, has come true. Every prediction, everything. So he said, this is simple. All you got to do is don't argue with him. Praise him. Give him comfort. Be loving and sweet. Whatever he does or says, respect him. Your father is a great man. He said, and that's all you got to do. Take care of him. And I remember I said to Tisziji, he pushes my buttons. Tisziji said, get rid of your buttons. Don't have any buttons. There is no buttons. He comes up with these great sayings that are pretty funny too. He goes, he says, no offense, no defense, no fence at all. So I started doing that. I started, I didn't react when my dad would say things that would ordinarily piss me off, right? Yeah. And I started just being sweet and helping him as much as I could. And everything changed between me and my dad. And the last, he lived another 6 or 7 years after that meeting, was completely sweet with me and my dad. After 40 years of being like banging heads, and my father said to Tisziji, because he would call Tisziji, or Tisziji would call him to see how I was doing, and they became so close, and it was a miracle. I never would have expected it. My dad and my mom both were like hardcore atheists. Right. Not only did they not believe in God, they would say anybody who believes in that shit is a fucking idiot. That was my parent, Not that Tisziji is religious, but he's spiritual, which is a difference.
Yeah.
So, my dad, I was, he'd be like, yeah, spiritual, what the, but he got it, man. He got it. And he called Tisziji, who of course was younger. He said, that's my father. My dad called Tisziji father. And he said, that's my rabbi.
Wow.
And he said to me, Tisziji gave me the greatest gift of all. He gave me back the love of my son.
Oh.
That's deep, man. That's profound. So of all the things that Tisziji has done, that's one of the most profound things, that he had the wisdom and the responsibility to do that. He knew that was important for my peace, for my development, is to heal this, and there's no one else who could have or would have done that. Nobody.
Yeah.
Who would be capable of doing that. And so the last time with my dad was really great. And before he passed, he said to Tisziji, he said, please, I won't be around. Take care of my son. He said, you're his father now.
Oh.
I never could be the father to him that you are.
Oh.
That's sweet. And
Totally.
so Tisziji, took that to heart too. So, when he sees me going off the path, he puts the torch to my ass too, because he said, your father asked me, I have to honor that, so I'm, but, when he's putting the burn on me, it's the most beautiful gift. A lot of people can't take it because they're too reactive, but because it's not personal. He said to me, he said, when I'm attacking, I'm not attacking you.
Yeah.
I'm attacking your bullshit. Do you want to keep your bullshit? I said, no. So I always say to Tisziji, sharpen up the machete, man. Off with his head, And he has been rough at some time. Lately, not so much, which I think means that I have made some progress.
Yeah.
You don't have to torch me as much as in the early days,
Wow.
Yeah. That's Tisziji, but that's Bapu, and the gift of having access to a spiritual master. People talk about the Dalai Lama like he's a spiritual master, like probably he is in his own way. Although from what I can see, he still has some political attachment to things. But a great man for sure. But how much time can anybody spend with him?
Right.
You might pass by and touch his hand and and bow. I mean, Tisziji has spent hours and hours and hours and days working on me. You couldn't pay a therapist that much. You couldn't, and plus, with all due respect to therapy, I went to therapy. It didn't change me at all, like Tisziji. has helped change me,
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. You're just listening to you makes me contemplate, of course, who have been teachers of mine, that's certainly, that relationship is pretty dramatic. And there are people, and there are people who I just know are my teachers. And even if they are even just a little bit higher frequency than I am, I still know that. I admire that and know that. And I'm very appreciative of that. Well, actually, Jay is like that for me. She's a dear friend of mine. She was around when my sister was dying, and we worked together and all kinds of stuff. And she's always been totally sweet to me. But I always consider that she's a teacher for me.
yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
Well, there are many people who help you, and certainly when you've received some light, then it's important that you pass on the light to
Yeah.
other peeps. But the truth of it is, spiritual masters are really few and far between.
Yeah.
I've met many musical masters. Been
Yeah.
fortunate that way, and they're not that unusual. They're all over the world, and there's some young ones already that are already musical masters at incredibly young age, prodigies and such. Spiritual masters, I'm been around 72 years, almost 73. I only met one so far. I was on a plane with a guy who seemed to be that. I was on a plane ride, I think going from somewhere to Seattle, and I sat across from this Tibetan guy. He was Trungpa Rinpoche, and he had that aura, and he had followers around him. He was all dressed in orange, and is Tibetan Buddhist,
Yeah.
And he turned to me at one point and he smiled, and his smile was like the sun coming out, But there again, I don't speak Tibetan. I'm not sure how much English he had, and at best, what I get a minute with him, a few, if I was lucky or something, and not only that, but I can guarantee you this: he don't play the guitar like Tisziji does, man. Tisziji is the best guru for musicians, because also, I don't know what that guy's life was like, but I imagine that from a very early age he was groomed and trained to be on that path, to be a Buddhist practitioner and eventually a master and such. Tisziji, and he started out in Puerto Rican from Brooklyn, a Cungero virtuoso who was a gang leader who used to steal cars,
Wow.
who was in the military and jumped out of airplanes, man, I don't think he ever did drugs particularly, but I know he had a lot of women and stuff. So, in other words, he's had all the experiences that most of us have had. So
Yeah.
now that someone like that became a spiritual master is really like that. It's kind of like you can say, spirit works in mysterious ways, and how this funky Puerto Rican guy became that. And there are a lot of reasons why. I mean, it was kind of predestined for him as well. But the truth is, he really resisted it. He just wanted to be a normal cat.
Yeah.
Because his path is absolutely selfless, man. And that's a hard path to take,
Yeah.
24/7,
Yeah.
But so many things happened in his life, karmic events, that pointed him that he had to do it. He had to do it.
Yeah.
And he's been a renunciate. He's had so many offers. I mean, Miles wanted him in his band. Pharoah Sanders actually did have him in his band, but he wanted to take him on the road. He was always saying, Tisziji, come out with me. There was a famous producer who passed recently named Phil Ramone.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Phil Ramone was a hit maker. And he's recorded Tony Bennett and Aretha Franklin and Paul Simon, and he knows how to make money in music and such,
Yeah.
And one of Tisziji people worked for Phil at one point, so they got introduced, and Phil said to him, he said, I could make you rich. I could make you a star. He said, you're like a combination. He said, this was his point with Phil. who is a classically trained violin player. Actually, he was a musician, Phil.
Really?
Yes, and he had the best engineers and the best studio and stuff. Yeah, he's a high-level producer, and he said your guitar is kind of like a combination of Hendrix and Coltrane. He said, if you let me produce you, I could make you a big star. Right? And Tisziji was very gracious. Oh, thank you. That's so beautiful. I gave him a big hug and everything, and said, but no, I can't do that. And also Phil wanted to change his music. He wanted to make it more,
accessible or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And Tisziji said, no, I have to keep it pure. That's my path. And so he's been a renunciate. He has all these opportunities. I mean, he had women, and gorgeous women too, who said, who were rich, who said, I'll buy you a mansion, your own studio. You can be my guru. And Tisziji said, no. So he said something to me the other day. I think yesterday, actually, he said, because he's going through some interesting changes now. He may have to move from his place. He's not sure where he's going to be. He said, I don't want good. I want God. So, there could be being too comfortable could be actually an impediment to your spiritual practice.
Yeah.
Or being attached to being too comfortable.
Actually, my friend Roland, he wanted to ask you to explain attachment out of those 5.
Oh, yeah. Well, attachment, is, all right, we'll put it this way, because, Tisziji says these things a lot of times about musicians. He's brutally honest about musicians, and not just musicians, artists, and often saying, how really not happy a lot of the people are. And I push back, not because I doubt what he says, but because I love to hear his answers. You know? So I challenge what he says a lot. And I was thinking of a particular musician. I don't have to mention his name, but he's like pretty successful. He also was a teacher at NEC. I'm not sure if he still is. And he always seems happy, always seems happy and everything. I said, but I didn't mention the name or anything, but I said, well, I know a musician, seemed really, really happy with his life. And Tisziji said, take away his instrument, take away his gigs, take away his wife or his girlfriend, take away his house. Because the guy has all of that. He has a nice house. He has a really, really nice house that he owns with land. He has a great wife. They have a good relation. I suppose they've been together for 40 years, a long time. He's making money. He's got gigs all the time, although now maybe with COVID, not so much. He's got his instruments, his studio. He can do music every day. And he said, take all that away. Would he still be a happy cat? And I thought, maybe not, So that's really what attachment is. It can be attachment to a people or relationships, or many people are attached to having a relationship. Like they can't handle being alone. One of Tisziji greatest books is called Blessed Aloneness, which gives you appreciation of the beauty of being alone and how that's, because you're never really alone. You've got the karma and all your ancestors are with you, and really the whole world is psychically with you. You can tap in to any of that without people being around, So people are attached to social things, to having girlfriends or boyfriends, or attached to, I remember being in a little restaurant in Boston. I heard this young lady. She had to be like 20 years old, and she was talking pretty loud so I could hear her conversation to her friend. And she was saying, I have to have a relationship and a career, or I wouldn't be happy. And I remember thinking to myself, you're setting yourself up for some real pain, because I'm sitting here and I'm more than twice her age, and I'm thinking, I don't have a career or a relationship, and I'm very happy. Right? I have no career. I did 5 gigs before COVID. I would get 5 gigs a year, maybe.
Yeah.
Right? I have no record deal. I have no manager. I make my own records, which is a miracle in itself. I have no girlfriend. I have no relationship. I have some close friends, but I talk to them once in a great while. lately, both of my roommates have been gone. I've been in the house by myself. I love it, man. I love it. So I have roommates because I can't afford the rent by myself, But fortunately, they're both cool and good people and everything. So, yeah. So that's attachment. Listen, I remember when Tisziji mom passed, and I know he really loved his mom. He was exactly the same, and it wasn't that he didn't love her.
Yeah.
Believe me. But he was exactly the same. People, oh God, my mother died. Oh,
Yeah.
His son is born with a really bad disease. I forget the name of it. Maybe it's muscular dystrophy. I think it's the same disease that the guy had in that movie, My Left Foot. You ever see that movie with Daniel Day-Lewis?
Yeah.
Great movie. And it was based on a real person who all he could move was his left foot. And the only thing he had control over. Yeah. And he hardly could speak. He had to be trained to speak. He sounded like, oh, yeah, well, that Ralph Tisziji son, Reb, is like that. And his health has always been, Reb is like a guru in himself. I love that kid, man. Well, he's not a kid now. He's about 40, Reb. But I know if Reb should pass, Tisziji would be the same. And he loves his son. He'd be the same. I know it. And he'd still be helping others. It wouldn't be about him, like, oh, I lost my son,
Yeah.
That's no attachment. In my case, I got a little. That was never the worst of the five. I think with me, the worst was anger. I used to be very angry. And Tisziji told me later when I came to him for spiritual practice, he said, when I first met you, you were one of the angriest people I ever met. He could see it really clearly. And looking back, I said, oh, yeah, that's absolutely true. I'm not proud of it. It's just how I was. And I was angry about things not just that happened to me, but any injustice in the world made me angry. And you look at the world, you could be angry 24/7.
Yeah.
Because there's so much injustice and things going on, but it doesn't help. That's what I learned.
Right.
The anger doesn't help. It might help some people. It might be something they need to go through. It could be. My ex, Teresa, was always angry about political stuff. And I ran into her recently, and she's still angry. But in a way, that's her healing. That's her way of caring.
Yeah.
That's her form of love,
Right.
So it may be in certain situations, But for me, it was definitely not good. It was not good. I, in school, I was the bully buster. You know how people bully people? They never bullied me. But they would pick on the kid who was overweight or had a lisp or had thick glasses or looked funny. And some big kids, man, would pick on the little guy. They would take his hat or something, and he'd want his hat, and they would throw it to the other guy. Hey, come get it. I would go up to the biggest guy, and I was half his size, and I would say, give him his hat back right now. They say, oh, yeah, or what? I said, I'll put you in the hospital. That's what. You want to try me? Let's go. And I was so intense that they would usually give him his hat back. I usually didn't have to fight because I had that intensity. They'd see like I was ready to kill this person. So I was like that. I was always very angry about injustice or people mistreating people or anything like that. So, but now, nah.
Well, there's a chart that I used to be familiar with of emotions, and it's actually on a scale, higher and lower. And as you're coming up from the bottom half, you pass through and you enter the top half, you pass through anger. And then you start getting into the lighter, more spiritual emotions, or I guess you could say more spiritual, but because every emotion is spiritual in some way. But anyway, anger, it's interesting. So you might have been coming from below, moving up,
Yeah, true. But I have to say, Tisziji was a very important part of helping me pass through that. He talks about the way to be is compassionate detachment.
Yes.
So you have compassion for all the suffering, but you're detached from it. It doesn't take you down with it.
Yes. Well,
and that way you're better able to serve people and help people if you remain detached. If you get too bent out of shape, then you're not seeing clearly. And if you're not seeing clearly, you're less helpful to others. So.
Yes, and you spoke before about taking responsibility for both the good and the bad. I've thought like that for a long time. It's like if I can confront something, like look at it fully and take responsibility for it, there's no problems. Just that they don't exist because I've created everything, the good, the bad, everything.
Exactly, exactly, and the spiritual premise that most people can't hang with is there is no self. It's an illusion. So once you come to, which a lot of people can't accept that because they're so in the self mind that they can't. It sounds like bullshit to them,
Yeah.
But if you can, once you come to accept that as reality, then who is there to be offended? Who is there to be angry? Who is there to be? Who is there to suffer?
Yeah.
And so at that point, it's I don't have the anger anymore, and I don't really suffer anymore. And everything that does happen to you is you look at it as a learning, as a blessing.
Yeah.
Something to learn from. And Tisziji has said too that that only when you're banged do you come to spiritual. It takes being like really, you have to, in other words, there's no spiritual growth without suffering. It's the suffering that propels you to work on your stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Or for some of us never work on their stuff and they stay in the same suffering patterns till the end. But some of us who've been lucky enough to have a teacher or a guide, we start to work on our stuff and we let go of these self. So I believe that totally. And once I became a spiritual practitioner, I used to say how my luck was so bad, like Job.
Yeah.
My luck is really good. Like even one time when my car broke down on the highway at 3:00 in the morning in the freezing winter, and I did not have a cell phone, okay? The car actually died right at the toll booth. If it had made it another 2 miles, I'd have been in the dark all night in this freezing car, waiting to hopefully a cop would drive by, and then the whole process would begin. But because, you say, hey, your car dies, that's bad, that's bad. No, but the way it died was like, and there is a toll booth, so they had a little wait station that was warm, and they helped me the 3 people came out and helped me push my car. They were on the phone with the state police and the towing people. In like 2 minutes, I had a phone. So, you know what I'm saying? That these days, I don't take it for granted, but generally, I think I went from the worst luck in the world to really pretty good luck, and
That's great. I love this. I know we could talk for hours more, but it's been 2 hours, so I don't want to take up too much of your time too. But I mean, yeah, I just love talking to you and hearing you, and being inspired by you still beyond your music, which is really wonderful.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I feel like this is the best time in my life, definitely. And it also feels like a beginning too, like just a beginning. And the way I'm playing these days, more free and more open, the rubato world is like, wow, that's so healing to me. I think for many people, playing what they know, what they're familiar with, is their medicine. That's what makes them feel good. That's their healing.
Yeah.
For me and a few people, maybe I'm sure I know there's others. Thankfully, I have some brothers and sisters in this. But what heals me is to play what I don't know.
Yeah.
And what I can't be known from the intellect or from the rational mind, right? Or as I often like to say, untranscribable. That's what I am. Right? Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for talking. When is your birthday?
My birthday is January 28th.
Oh, it's coming right up. Oh, yeah, right. We spoke about that a little bit.
Yeah, the second worst blizzard of the century. My mom used to tell me, and I go, yeah, mom. And then I looked it up, and she wasn't kidding, man. It was like serious. And she had to walk like 12 blocks in snow drifts in labor just to get to the hospital. There was no taxis. There was no driving.
Maybe that's why you were pissed off in your youth.
I don't know. Hey, when I was really young, I was pretty happy. I started getting unhappy at school when school got serious, when I had to do homework, and I had teachers telling me what to do that I didn't respect.
Yeah.
That's when I became really angry and started to, and I think in a way, I needed that anger at that time because it was my way of defining myself.
Yeah.
But now I don't need it at all. You know, there's no reason to be angry. You know, I mean, there are reasons, but no, not for me.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here.
I appreciate it. It's great to talk to you. It's great to see you. And let's collaborate.
Okay.
You sent me a track that I wasn't able to access, the piece that you did, Benny Maupin's piece, I think.
Oh, okay.
For some reason, the WeTransfer thing didn't work for me. So maybe you can send that to me again in a separate email or some other way. But
Yeah.
I did get to see a little bit of Brad, the percussionist, and the little bit that I saw, I think he's great, and you know, I appreciate knowing about him, and you know, maybe we can do something together sometime. I like what I heard.
Yeah,
He
that
had
would be
beautiful tones, and
Yeah.
obviously, you know, very creative person, no question.
Very, very creative. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow I'm going to interview Bill Cunliffe, who's a really great pianist, very well respected, lives in LA. And that's going to be really fun. And next week, Norma Winstone. Do you know Norma?
Yeah, the singer. She was married to John Taylor, the English piano player.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear she's still around. I guess must be getting pretty old now.
Well, she's not that old, actually, and she's still singing beautifully. In fact, I think Jay and she had done something a little more recently, like Jay was kind of reviving her, the small vocal group that Gene Lee had been in too.
Oh.
And yeah, so Norma, I've known Norma for a while, and she and I recorded together a little. And
She's a great singer, definitely.
Yeah. Greg Abett and Frank Griffith. And anyway, it's going to
Abati, is that maybe it's pronounced Abati?
Is it Abati?
I thought so. It's Italian, right?
Yeah. I thought it was with an E, Abete.
Abete. I could be wrong. Could be somebody else, I think. Anyway, I don't know. But I seem to remember a Greg Abate who was a sax player. Is a sax player?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's the name. But you know, he'll tell you if you pronounce it wrong. I could be
Certainly
wrong.
will.
Yeah.
I'll call him the first 15 minutes, you know, and he'll say, no, that's not the way you say my name.
Yeah, okay. Well, good. Well, Jay Clayton, if you're still there, let's talk.
Yeah.
I love you. And Bill Goodwin, too. I love to hear your voice, and I love to see you. And if we ever get in the proximity again, I'm going to give you a big hug with a mask. You know, don't worry, but I gotta give you a hug because I love you and I love your drumming, man, and I appreciate that you dig me as well. And that means a lot to me. So, thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Cathy. Be well, stay safe.
You too.
Let's talk soon.
Okay.
I'll send you that piece too. So I mean,
Please do. That'll be exciting.
Collaborate. You know.
Okay. All right.
All right. Thank you. Love always.
Bye,
See you.
everybody.